All right, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out. Again, this is the non-traditional careers, understanding options for career paths that are outside of your major. This is going to be the panel. My name is Nomith Murari. I'm going to be moderating this session. And just to tell you where I'm coming from and who I'm representing, I'm in the W.P. Carey School of Business. And I'm representing an organization, a student organization called Generation Financial Knowledge Development. And we are focused on promoting financial literacy and career development for college students at ASU. And so I just want to take a quick minute to have all of our panelists introduce themselves. Let's hear your names, what you studied, and what non-traditional career for your major that you are in now, very quickly, if you want to go ahead and down the line.
Okay, my name is Parrish Spies. Do I need that? Yeah. Okay, I feel the voice. My name is Parrish Spies. I'm with the city of Tempe, and my degree was a Bachelor's of Communication Studies at the University of Detroit. Though I since got my master's in management and also a certified public manager designation. And the other part of the question was?
What non-traditional career for your major are you in now?
Well, okay, then I'm a council aide, which is someone who you probably know, if you know politics, it's someone who supports an elected official. So that is something that was way different than what I started out to do.
Awesome, thank you.
Hey, my name's Lee Hammer, Director of Client Services for a company called TiesTech. I went to school at ASU for supply chain management, and now I do sales for technology solutions, so definitely different from what I went to school for.
Hello, my name is John Bernard. I am the Director of Business Development for a company called WASU, but I went to school for computer networking and applied management. It's different from what I do now.
Hello. Hi, my name is Sean. I'm currently a software engineer working for this marketing firm called Digital Airstrike. They're in Scottsdale. I went to school for almost like 7-8 years. I have 2 degrees, all in chemistry and material science, so they're definitely not what I'm doing right now. Yeah.
That's perfect. Thank you guys so much for sharing that. And I think now that we understand what you studied and where you ended up, I think a logical first question for you guys would be, how exactly was your path from graduating from school with your certain degree, and how did you navigate the professional world to get to where you are? How did that opportunity arise? And just a little bit of that story, if we could go down the line.
I can go first on that. So for me, I was pursuing my dream outside of where I grew up. I grew up from Detroit, left there for San Francisco to pursue the gold rush idea, kind of make my dreams come true. But I didn't have a lot of money saved, and so if you know San Francisco prices, you know that you have to just be ready and adaptable and agile to try to make something happen for yourself. So I ended up finding a job with a publishing company, and it was entry level, and it sort of matched a little bit in my area. It was publishing, I was communication studies, I really wanted to get more involved in public relations, advertising, but it was close. And so I think for me is just sort of being open to those opportunities that, you don't have to necessarily just be rigid in your thinking of what you're going to do, but be open to the opportunities that come up. And if they match, let's say you have 10 things that you really want to do, maybe you got a match of 5 out of 10, that's good. You would have to make up your own mind whether you need 10 out of 10 or what would be a good number.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, can you guys hear me? All right, cool. So, being respectful of everyone's time, I'll tell the abbreviated version of this story. So essentially, I was getting ready to graduate at ASU. Dude, I was a good student, had extracurriculars, good GPA. I made Dean's List multiple times. And we're getting towards the end, coming up on graduation, we have final projects. I had a buddy named Saleh. Saleh was an international student. And we're working on a project one day. He goes, hey man, are you going to the career fair? I was like, no, I'm not going to the career fair, man. We got a project due tomorrow. Like, I got to zero in on this. Well, essentially, we got out of school, we graduated. Saleh got a job. I didn't. And then I was on a plane at another time, and I happened to see one of my former classmates on the plane. I was like, hey, dude, what's up? Like, what are you up to? He's like, I work for the airline, and I can fly wherever I want for free on the weekends. And I was still unemployed. And I had thought to myself, I helped this guy pass class. What's going on? And so I realized then that I had been focused or I missed out on some opportunities and the importance of connections and networks. And I'll tell you that every job I've ever received has come from personal connection. So my first job coming out was through a personal connection. And I've lived multiple lives and done multiple careers, but each opportunity I've had has come from a non-traditional format. And so you have to be open to connecting with people as you move forward and understand the power of networking. And that's not necessarily something that gets touched on in class a lot. So I'll elaborate on that more later.
So my experience was a little different. I am an example of you're a non-traditional student. I came to the United States in my early 20s, got married, had a kid, then I decided to go to school. I was 26 when I started my college career. I was working a full-time job. I had to play the dad thing and the husband thing, but then I had to get good grades. So I did a mixture. I did a hybrid program, online and on campus. I managed to get really good grades. Graduated. I spoke at my graduation as one of the student speakers. And as I walked down, the president of the university, National American University, walked over to me and said, if you want a job today, you have a job. Kind of see me after here. So my experience was a little different. But I'll talk a little bit more about how I got there. It was intentional. Everything I did from the day one until I graduated was intentional. So I'll talk about that.
All right, so I probably have the lowest GPA out of this panelist. So I could be your typical college student friend. So graduating in 2008, with the whole subprime mortgage. By the way, I graduated from UC Santa Barbara, if you guys know where that is. With really low GPA and just time at the time, it was really hard for me to find any job. So I was willing to do anything. I tried out like actuary exams, that was popular back then. Tried for med school, I don't know what got into my mind, but I thought somehow if I get a good MCAT score, I'll get in. That didn't work out. So eventually I went back to school. I went back to Korea where I was born, and then I tried to get like master's and PhD. Obviously that kind of didn't work out either. I got out with a master's, but not with a PhD. When I came back, I was working at ASU and local laboratories, roughly making about like $20,000 per year. So don't work for ASU, that kind of cheap. But anyways, so one day just like something hit my mind. I was like, you know what? I better find like a real solution to my life. Start writing down what I truly love, and it turned out to be like gaming. So what's closest thing to gaming turned out to be programming. So I started programming small games, and about 6 months of studies and 6 months of doing coding boot camps, I ended up getting my first job in programming, working for this big corporate.
Awesome. Great stories, guys. Thank you so much for sharing. And if there's one thing I took away from all of your stories, it's that even though you didn't end up going into the actual career path, kind of prescribed by the major that you studied, it's that you definitely took skills that you learned from studying that degree and then applied them to your new occupations. So actually, if we could have the panel go in reverse this time, I'd love to know what specific skills of employability you were able to take from your degrees and apply them to your careers.
I guess I should say, I don't know if it's related to my degree, but because I was able to try so many things because of what I just told you guys, I got this specific skill called adaptability, and I was able to adapt into new culture. I worked in laboratories across the sea and local in California and all these different places. And that kind of helped me making transition into the programming industry. So most people get a little bit scared about jumping in a new field, and it was a much better experience for me because I've sort of done it with other field too. I used to work at restaurants as well.
For me, it's interpersonal skills. I have always been outspoken, a people person. So interpersonal skills. I've always stepped up to want to be a leader of a group. So all of my projects in school, I was fighting to be a leader of a project. I always wanted to be a leader. I always wanted to show that I could help other people accomplish their goals. So I always wanted to be a leader, work well with people. I was voted most liked person on campus multiple years, but it was just that. My fearlessness, leadership, communication, and just being a good people person.
Thanks. Yeah. So, again, I think there's multiple attributes, skills that have contributed to my success in my career. But if I zero in on my degree, which was in supply chain management, and how it's helped me throughout my career, it's kind of interesting because I'm sitting in supply chain classes, and they're zeroing in on process and relationships between processes. And you sit in a class for 4 years and get that drilled into your head, it's gonna kind of become part of your DNA and how you think. And so I've lived multiple lives, had multiple careers, but each career I've carried that focus or that specialty on understanding processes with me to every new department, every new company. And one of my former bosses said, hey man, this is kind of a linchpin of what you bring to the table, is seeing a big picture, assessing processes, and then automating them. So thanks ASU.
Yeah, and I have to say my experiences really mirror my fellow panelists here, but maybe focused on adaptability, because when I told you I moved to San Francisco, but it also was at a time of recession too. So I had to think quickly on my feet, and I think the only thing I would add is being able to take the initiative. So being entrepreneurial with your career, so not necessarily creating your own company, although that's something that's great too, but sort of in your own career, just be entrepreneurial and take that initiative to go do something.
That's awesome. Thank you guys so much for sharing that. And I'm glad we took the time to understand what skills specifically from your degree were able to help you, even though you didn't end up going into those fields. But I know I had the question, at least while listening to you guys, that sometimes you need to have skills that come outside of the degree as well, and sometimes you'll have to take it upon yourself to acquire those new skills that make you adaptable and have the flexibility in the workplace. So what options exist in the real world for us to acquire new skills and become more adaptable, like so many of you mentioned?
Yeah, say that question again. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so the question is, a degree is one way to get skills, but what other options are there if I wanted to either pivot my career path or develop a new one? What options are there for me to acquire new skills so that I can be more adaptable and be variable, like you guys mentioned?
Okay, so if you're coming from a position where you haven't had a career job yet, I would also look at maybe the part-time jobs that you are putting together. What can you distill from those experiences? If you're working in the hospitality industry, you know, the idea of customer service and that whole experience that you're giving a customer. And this kind of goes back to also what I'm doing with Tempe Professional Development Network, which is an employee organization within the city of Tempe, where we help people sharpen the saw. You know, what other skills can you gain or improve upon that helps you be more competitive? And I would say that it's going to be a continuing learning process, because things you're learning now are really important. I mean, I still retain some of the things that I learned several years ago in college, but the idea that you just want to keep learning, whether it's taking a class, and you're networking, meeting people outside of what you do, finding out, you know, how they do things, reading. I would say, you know, pick up books, magazines, articles, anything you can get your hands on, and just keep learning to, as I said, sharpen your saw to be more competitive. That's how you can pick up other skills too. Or, you know, even volunteering on something. Because usually if you're volunteering, there's a low risk. You can say, let's say you don't have any marketing experience, but you're working with a nonprofit and they just need somebody maybe to do some marketing. So you're like, hey, I'll do it, you know, and then you maybe network with a guy like Sean and, you know, or, you know, kind of, you know, work together on it. So you can learn from somebody else as well.
Hey, thanks, Parrish. I absolutely agree with you, and I'll tell you what, Nomit, this is my favorite question so far, absolutely. So many things come to mind. Parrish did a good job of shotgunning that and taking a lot of the good talking points. But dude, I think a big impact of what your life turns into, man, is how you spend your time before 8 a.m. and after 5 p.m. You have a wealth of time on your hands between then to be sharpening your skills, learning things, connecting with people. And I think I'll tell you what, man, one of the most interesting skills, and we can talk about learning agility, like your ability to pick up and learn new things. As the workforce changes, the skills and the talents required of you are going to continuously change too. The people who are going to rise to the top are the people who are able to develop new skills. So one resource that we have available to us is the internet. And I'll tell you what, man, you want to go learn something on the internet, nothing will confuse you faster. There's so many different opinions. But if you learn how to learn from the internet, and how to be strategic in your learning so that you're not a confused little kid, but you can zero on like exactly what it is you're trying to do, that'll be tremendously helpful to you. All the people that I work with, the employees, I ask them, hey, where do you learn this? Where do you learn that? And it's really interesting. So as you go and you research a new topic, you're gonna find out there's 1,000 different opinions on whatever it is you're trying to learn. Go ahead, get a feel for the depth and the breadth of everything around, but then find out who are the key influencers, who are the people who really know what they're doing, and once you've identified them as like a trusted resource, you zero in and you dig deep, and you learn study everything, all the material that they have on the topic that you're interested in, and I think that would be a really good starting point for you. And I can't express as much too, is the ability to have a network that you can reach out to. It's so easy for me if I know that John is really into a certain topic and he's already spent hours learning it, it's so helpful for me to have a 30-minute conversation over coffee to be like, dude, dump it on me. Let me know what you know. And that's attributed more than anything to my career.
So we hear from time to time, we hear about different industries being disrupted by technology. There's no industry that is more disrupted than the education space, right? So everything that we are doing here today, we didn't have access to 20, 30 years ago. But technology is making this possible. I bring this up because you need to set yourself apart from the rest of your classmates. This year, several thousands of students will graduate from ASU with the same degrees that you guys have. What's going to set you apart? Look for that thing. So for example, what we do at WASU, we train people who want to learn to code, become software developers. We train you in a short amount of time. You can do that online or on campus. So find something that's going to give you an edge. Even with the 4.0, you have 80 other students behind you with a 4.0. They're connected. They have parents who are connected. What do you have above and beyond this piece of paper that you get from ASU, right? So you got to think about that. That's my advice. That's what I would give you. Find that thing, go after it. Coding can only help. That's one thing. I was just reading an article about accountant, an accountant who decided, okay, I got to do something different, and he went and became a coder. That transformed his career entirely. Now he doesn't even work as an accountant. But that's a different story.
Right, so I'm going to give kind of add on top of what everyone said and probably give you a little more practical advice. I learned most of my programming from these websites called like EDX, Coursera's, and Free Code Camp, Udemy. What they have in common is they provide abundance of cheap or really quality courses. So you can go there, like if you go to Udemy, if you want to just pick up like jazz piano, you could buy a course for like 10, 15 bucks. You go to YouTube and watch like the entire introductory computer science course provided from Harvard for free. So I did that last year along with MIT course, and it was super helpful.
Awesome. So great takeaways, I think, from that in terms of maintaining continuous learning in your professional lives, in that your degree is really important, but it's important to supplement that because in terms of your interests and your passions, there's always more to build on top of. But I wanted to return to a point that both Lee and John made in terms of you have to learn specific information about your industry in order to stay relevant because those industries are always changing. And I know we have a diverse set of industries sitting at the panel today. So I'd like to ask some targeted questions about kind of general trends that are happening in that sphere, if that's okay. So I wanted to start with Parrish. I know you are in the public sector, you're working in government, and you have experience with a professional development network as well. So if you could kind of tell us what kind of trends have you been noticing or changes in the past 5 to 10 years in the public sector, and what that means for people going into that career field as well.
Well, there are a couple of trends. One, probably the biggest, is the Amazon phenomenon, where people want answers quickly. They want solutions now, and government hasn't really been prepared for that. A lot of cities now are moving towards something called like a 311 system. So you have a phone operator through the email or online. You can put in work orders, complaining about your neighbors. Hey, they have weeds or their trash is, piling up. Can you get a code officer there? Or even anything related to just, traffic problems. And these are things that you can't really respond quickly because in government, you need to do studies and you have to have public input. So it's really sort of the compression of all of this is happening. So that's a trend that we haven't really figured out yet. But I think that overall, government is working more like a business to have strategic plans, performance measures, and that's how I got into government, really, is that I had a varied career after I left college. I worked in publishing, but I worked in the private sector and then found my way into government because I wanted to contribute that way. So I would have to say it's the Amazon phenomenon. People want things now, and the idea that government is becoming more like a business and having to apply certain principles to the way we do things.
Some great insight, thank you. And actually, I just wanted to take a quick jump over to John. I know you're in the education industry, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on changes in the past 5 to 10 years. Is it a similar story of technological disruption there as well? And if so, maybe there are some other trends that you could talk about as well in the education field.
Right. So what we've noticed over the last 10 years, here in the United States, in Africa, in the Middle East, is more, better, faster. People want more skillful graduates, they want skillful employees, they want better outputs, and they want this faster. So we talked about Amazon, more, better, faster. How can you be a better employee? How can you do more with the little education that you already have? Faster. Let's do this faster. This is where technology comes into play. So more, better, faster. Think about those 3 words. More, better, faster. It's a trend we're seeing everywhere. As an example. So in Sierra Leone, I'm on this farm. It's a pineapple farm. I'm on this farm, and this guy I'm talking to the farmer, he has what I would consider a warehouse of pineapples, but they don't have good roads to get this thing to the market. So he's asking, we're discussing how can technology make this possible? More, better, faster, right? So think about those 3 words.
It's awesome, thank you. And so while we're on the topic of industries, I think while we have some experts in the field, it's worth getting some common myths or misconceptions out of the way as well. I think when we think of, public service or government, we have a certain stereotype about how that works, and we have a very specific idea of how technology works and how the industry is in Silicon Valley. But if we could just go down the line here, what are some common misconceptions that people have about the industries in which you work, and how is the industry fighting those? What movements or initiatives are there to make sure that the wrong information about your industry isn't as prevalent?
Well, I guess, we're all supposed to be just government clerks who just push paper. And I'm sure there are people like that. But I can tell you in Tempe, we are really energetic and innovative to try to get things done. And I think that's the misconception, is that the public is of 2 minds. You're just a clerk draining the taxpayer money. But at the same time, there are certain demands. And there are more demands now that you probably won't even think about is that looking at the whole, ecosystem of a city, and from the human services aspect of good education, good job opportunities, and having those skills to meet those new job opportunities. And you're looking at poverty and all these other components that make up a community, that there's more pressure on government to try to make a difference. And that's I think sometimes the public doesn't realize that, you might in your own world are saying, we got to do more about, getting rid of poverty and helping people rise up. And others say, we just need, tech jobs. But if you're in poverty, the last thing you're thinking about is, going to college and getting a job. That might be an aspirational goal, but at the same time, you may not even have that goal because you're just looking at the whole hierarchy of needs, where you just want food and shelter just to, get yourself together before you can move on. So I think that's probably one of the biggest misconceptions.
Thanks, Parrish. So I work in tech, I work in technology. I was thinking to myself, what are the common misconceptions that people have about technology? A couple things came to mind. So they think, hey, these guys are software engineers, they're wallflowers, they're introverts, they don't have anything to share with us. And I couldn't say that that's the opposite of what I've experienced. As I've met with different software engineers, as you talk to them about their passions, they can be some of the most sociable people ever, and some of the greatest resources for me for information as I navigate my career. There's much broader topics as well. There's a lot of, I guess you would call macro level questions, people asking about data, personalization, and what's being collected and for what reasons. And I would just throw out a disclaimer for everyone within the technology industry that essentially these are questions that weren't proposed as the technologies were being developed. And so it's not that anyone was, I guess, an evil henchman and had bad intentions. A lot of the data that was collected for the purpose and the intent of giving users and customers a personalized experience, which is what they showed that they wanted through their behaviors. And so now we're faced with these questions. And it's not essentially that anyone was evil from the offset, but now these are surfaced, and that's what we're trying to answer now. So that's just my disclaimer for my industry as a whole, man. Sure. Not bad guys.
So one misconception that people have when it comes to tech education, specifically programming, coding, is that you must know math. You got to be really good at math. That's not necessarily true. It's not. If you're committed to learning something, we can teach you. If you are good with art, you can solve problems. You have that stick-to-itness that all employers are looking for, right? So that's the first misconception, that you have to be good at math. You have to know all this formula and all. No, not necessarily true. Second, there's a misconception that you have to have it all together. You have to have all the pieces come together before you can do something like this. That's not true. We have students, graduates now, who came from being homeless, having just a GED. Now they're working for companies like GoDaddy, John Deere, you name it. So get rid of those misconceptions.
I guess the biggest misconception in this field, technology field, is people think that it's hard to get a job. No, I'm serious, because people think it's hard to get a job because they think it's like, oh, programming is difficult, so it must be really difficult to get a programming job. I'm gonna reverse that thought. Programming is hard. So if anyone tells you programming is easy, that's a lie. But getting a job is not hard. And I'm telling you this because stats are proving. I read this good article, I think it was provided from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It said by year 2020, we expect to have 1.4 million tech jobs. Because everything nowadays is just tech. Netflix is technically like entertainment company. Amazon is retail, Facebook is advertising, but they're all tech companies. Like everything's becoming tech, which means there's gonna be only really good growth of tech jobs out there, and we're only expect to have 400,000 computer science graduates by year 2020. That means we have 1 million vacant jobs. That's about $500 billion opportunities.
Wow, great insights. Thank you. And Sean, while you have the mic in your hand, I'm just going to follow up my next question to both you and Lee as the two representing the tech industry the most here. I think one thing we've heard over and over again at this panel is this idea of, the Amazon effect, globalization, and how industries are spanning not just the country or the state in which you live, but the entire world now. And we've also touched on skills a good amount, so I would love to know what skills or attributes are the most important to remaining relevant and competitive when everything is becoming so global and your competition isn't just the people you went to school with anymore, but the people who are also programming or doing client services across the entire world. So I guess, very simply put, how do we stay relevant?
Okay. I think this one seems like a difficult question, but I'm going to give you the simplest answer. My answer is recalibration. Most people tend to forget that. They're like, okay, like when I was doing chemistry for like 8-9 years, I just did that because I have a chem degree. I went to school for many, many dollars, many, many years, and I was like, you know what, this is probably something that I'm stuck with. No, always recalibrate every few months, every few years. Just really think about, hey, am I going the right path? Am I doing the right thing? Am I learning the correct things to make my lives better? So one of the steps that I went through was like, the moment I got like my fourth or fifth check from my previous job, turns out that it was really low paid, and just literally opened a whiteboard and started drawing. So what's the two single things that I could do it for hours and not get tired? One was gaming, and the other was playing soccer. Obviously, I can't be a professional soccer at the age of 30 or a professional gamer because I suck. So I started writing, okay, I could probably make some games. That could be pretty fun. So it started from there. Make games, okay, and something called programming. I guess I could do that. So try to recalibrate every once in a while.
Sean, I believe in your soccer skills, and I think you can make it, man. I'll go try out with you. But dude, tech. So to piggyback off that, man, as we're talking about recalibration, you talked about one method that you use for it, and let's break it down for these guys to put it into steps on how they recalibrate. I think it takes two things. I alluded to one of them earlier, and that's learning agility. And that's your ability to pick up new skills and technologies continuously. Learning is now a continuous thing. You graduated. Now the real work starts, okay? Build it into your life and into your habit. But that's cool if you're really good at learning. And I'm a curious cat, man. I'm always studying different things. But what if I'm studying something that's completely irrelevant? So as he talked about, you want to recalibrate. So you want to be in tune with the market and the industry that you're a part of. Now, when it comes to tech, from some of the hotshot engineers that I talk to, what they do is they follow influencers on Twitter. And whoever are the leading guys in tech, and I'm talking on an engineer level, the guys who are creating frameworks and libraries and doing that kind of work, they follow their trends. And if they follow the leaders, they're going to be miles ahead of their organization every single time. And they're the guys who are leading the pack. Now that's practical day-to-day stuff that you can apply to what you're doing. Stay in tune with the market and look at how you spend your time between 5 a.m. and 8 a.m. and after 5 p.m. because that's what's going to keep you relevant, not what you're doing between 8 and 5.
Well, I think you got to have grit because everyone knows you don't really make it until you've been fired about 3 times. I know that from personal experience, but no, you gotta be resilient. You gotta have perseverance. The idea of recalibrating and having that understanding that okay, it's let's go down a different road. But a few years ago, I was introduced to this book by Tony Wagner. He's a professor at Harvard. It's called Creating Innovators, and in it he has 7 survival skill traits that I read, and he's promoting this as a way that's what you got to be teaching now. And I read them and I thought, oh, this is great. These are things we already kind of know, but it's nice to kind of put it all in one spot. So I'm going to review it with you. And I think this is probably a big takeaway that I'd like to give you all in terms of, if you're going to pursue a career and you run into roadblocks and you go non-traditional. Because I think for a lot of us, what I'm hearing, it's circumstances that led us down the roads we're now travel. But the important thing is critical thinking and problem solving. If you can think critically and solve problems, you're going to be very valuable to an organization. And as I mentioned, the misconceptions in government, looking at it globally in terms of a community, if you're an engineer and you say, well, I'm a mechanical engineer by schooling, but I really want to do something else, those skills, you could apply that to government to help create solutions. The other thing is being able to collaborate across networks and lead with influence. So, when you talk about networking, really get in depth with the people to maybe leverage and working on projects together. So, that kind of goes back to the gig economy, which that's something that's happening in government too. Although we didn't really call it the gig economy, we call it, it's funded by a grant. So, you got 2 years of funding for maybe a special project about, youth reading, literacy, and after 2 years it goes away unless the city decides, oh, let's apply for the grant again if it's available, or if the city decides this was a really good program, let's absorb it, let's integrate it into our overall budget. Otherwise you're looking for another opportunity. So the third thing is taking the initiative in entrepreneurship, which I mentioned in terms of, when you're out there, just take the initiative yourself and just do it. The agility and adaptability to ride those waves. The ability to access and analyze information, kind of goes back to the critical thinking skills. Having effective oral and written communication is really important because you got to be able to communicate your ideas. And finally, and you mentioned it, Lee, the idea of just keeping your imagination and curiosity to see what else is out there. And as you're sitting there, like Sean was, what can I do? You start looking at what's available to me. And I think it's, I used to believe in this, but there's another school of thought that says, follow your passions. I don't necessarily think that you should be waiting to say, what's my passion? You could say your passion is eating cheeseburgers or whatever. It's like, oh, yeah, I don't know, I'm not really passionate about this, so I shouldn't pursue it. No, just be imaginative and saying, what do I already know and how can I package it into a problem solver for an organization? I think that's something to consider.
Awesome, thank you. And I think we've talked a lot about a lot of different attributes and skill sets that make people employable and very attractive in the current job market. Just to reiterate a couple of those, we've heard remain adaptable, always learning, these kinds of things. But I guess for our last question, I really want to leave our audience with a really actionable piece of, what can I do moving forward? And I know that's a question that all of you must have wondered in your career paths. So if we could start from Sean and move, closer here. If you could briefly give, one practical piece of advice, one action item that can really help our people move forward, what would that be?
Right, I'm not sure about you guys, but when I was entering a new field, a new industry, I felt something called imposter syndrome. Some of you guys probably heard of it. If you major is biology and you happen to work in accounting, you definitely feel it. It's a feeling that you feel like you're an imposter. You lie through your resumes and interviews. Somehow they give you a job, you're working there, you feel like an imposter every single day. I'm telling you, that's pretty real. I felt it last year for several months. And when it hits you, I guess my advice is don't try to compare yourself to someone who's established and who has lots of experience, because the chances are when you get a job, there's a lot of people like that. Always try to compare yourself to you yesterday. And literally, you gotta learn to be a little bit more content with your life. So if you have a cup in front of you and it's half filled, you gotta feel like, okay, it's half filled. I'm happy with that. How can I make it a little bit better than yesterday? And maybe I could drop a blue dye ink in there, blah, blah, blah. Just, really try to assess your life and am I living like every day contentfully? Am I making the best time of my lives?
So the one takeaway that I give is most people say, do what you love to do what you're passionate about. That is so true. However, it does not work for everybody. It does not. That's not the real world. I have a daughter who is in school studying musical theater. That's what she loves to do. But the reality is, she's learning to become a coder. That's non-negotiable. If I'm paying for it, she's going to learn to become a software developer. So that when the time comes that what she loves is not there to pay the bills, she has some skills that she'll be able to use to pay the bills. So don't get carried away by the shiny object syndromes. That's what it is, right? Don't get carried away by all these careers that you see on TV and want to do like this. But be realistic with yourself. That's it. Be realistic with yourself. Do what you love, but you have to learn to love what you do. Okay? You have to learn to love what you do.
I'll take it one of these times, I promise. But so one action item moving forward, the one thing. What are you gonna do? The one thing. This is the one thing, man. For 2 months, 5 days a week, every single week, meet with somebody new, and you're only allowed to ask them what you can do to help them. Try to keep up with that, and that'll change your life for sure.
That's good advice. You know, it's the idea of when you're in business, whatever you're doing, the idea is how can I make you successful? Because your success will come from helping them be successful. And I think that's a good way to look at it. I don't know if anyone here has ever heard Jamie Cassip from Google speak. I know he teaches at ASU. He's the education evangelist for Google. He talks about this idea that, you know, instead of saying, what do you want to be when you grow up, we should be asking different questions of ourselves and saying, what problem do you want to solve? And so added to all of the valuable wisdom here on this panel, I would say, you know, when you look at what you want to do next after graduation, is start asking yourself the question of what problem do I want to solve, and then gathering those skills, tools, and people you need to know to help you solve that problem. And that would lead you to whatever job is available in an industry that matches that goal.
That's great advice from all of you. Thank you so much for your insights. And we're nearing the end of our panel here, so I'd like to give the last few minutes for any of our audience members to talk to our panelists one-on-one. So I'll go ahead and wrap up here. Feel free to come up afterwards. But just as a reminder, again, I am representing Generation Financial Knowledge Development, a student organization at ASU, which is dedicated to financial literacy and your career development. So if you're interested in that and you found what we talked about here today to be valuable, please come and find us on campus. We would love to have you. And again, let's give it up for Parrish, Lee, John, and Sean for all of their insights and taking the time to be here.